get going now. My name is Zach Stewart, and I'm going to be your producer for today's event, which is addressing homelessness, promoting self-care, wellness, and
Your
treatment
conference is no longer being recorded.
And CODs. This is the third event in the PATH Effective Outreach and Engagement Services series. So before we get going, I just want to let you know that this event is being recorded. The audio is now broadcasting, so you should be hearing my voice. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services or the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We are providing live captioning for this webinar. You can click on the link on the screen right on this slide to access those captions, and we've also put that link in the All Questions box. That's going to be pinned right to the top of that box. Captions will open in a new window or tab that you can position anywhere you like on your screen. You can adjust the size, color, and speed of the captions. Your line is going to be muted for the duration of today's presentation, but you are able to communicate with us in a couple of ways. I see many of you have found that public chat. That's going to be located to the right of the slides today, and you can use that to type in to your fellow participants and to our presenter today. Just be aware anything you type in there is visible to everyone in the room. As I mentioned, we also have that All Questions box located right beneath the slides. Please use that today for your tech and your content questions. We will assist you with any tech issues right in that box, and then we will save your content questions for the Q&A session at the end. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to our moderator today, Sherry Downing, the Senior Program Manager with AHP and SAMHSA's HHRN Deputy Director. Sherry, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, Zach. Welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you're here. I am very excited about today's presentation. So we will get to it very soon. I will tell you that our agenda for today will be welcome and introductions, and we're going to define some terms and set some priorities, and then we'll talk a little bit about situational awareness, selecting an approach, intervening, evaluating, and then we'll have some questions and answers just like usual. But first, I would like to introduce Doreen Gross. She is the PATH Program Coordinator in SAMHSA's Division of Community and State Systems Development. Ms. Gross has more than 20 years of experience working with grants and contracts portfolios associated with people who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness, including PATH, the Treatment for Individuals Experiencing Homelessness, or TIEH, grants, cooperative agreements to benefit homeless individuals, or CABI, and the Services in Support of Housing grant programs. Ms. Gross has worked with other federal partners, including the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Administration for Children, Youth, and Families, and others to coordinate services policies and housing and homelessness-related activities. Ms. Gross served as a contracting officer representative, or CORE, on the Homeless and Housing Resource Network contract, and that is the one that you're hearing from today. We provide technical assistance and support to federal, state, and local agencies, providers, individuals, and families who experience or are at risk of homelessness. Ms. Gross holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland. Doreen, I am so happy you're here. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of SAMHSA, welcome to the webinar on promoting self-care, wellness, and treatment adherence among people with serious mental illnesses and co-occurring disorder. This topic is very important. We know under normal circumstances, self-care can be a challenge with work, school, family, friends, and other commitments. Often we find ourselves getting burned out, tired, and frustrated. So as you can imagine, self-care and wellness is even more difficult for a person with serious mental illness and co-occurring disorders. Today, we have a presenter who will share some valuable information about how to promote self-care and wellness among people with serious mental illness and co-occurring disorder. She will cover priorities to consider in working with people who are homeless. She's going to talk about situational awareness for both you and those you want to help, and then also and selecting a help approach, intervention, and boundaries. She's going to cover all of these things plus more. So anyway, I will turn it back over to Sherry, who's our moderator, who will introduce our presenter for today.
Thanks, Doreen. I appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
So the learning objectives for today's presentation. After participating in today's webinar, you'll understand priorities for addressing these complex issues, the activities and strategies needed to achieve your goals, some key process and outcome measures, and tasks for monitoring progress. I am so delighted to introduce Dr. Eileen Triggerboff, who is an RN, a PMHCNS BC, a DNS, and a DABFN, which are a whole lot of credentials that she has earned doing the amazing work that she does. I had the great privilege of hearing Dr. Triggerboff speak in a conference in New York, and couldn't wait to share her wonderful style with all of you. She's a clinical nurse specialist in a private psychotherapy practice in Western New York. She's also an expert witness and a national and international speaker and consultant to healthcare, government, and corporate organizations on a whole wide range of topics. She has a doctorate in nursing science and psychiatric nursing, and is board certified in adult psychiatry, mental health, forensic nursing, and hospital and behavioral health program accreditation. She's on the faculty of the University at Buffalo Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences Department of Psychiatry and School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. As a community mental health nurse, Dr. Triggerboff has treated people and conducted research with men, women, and children experiencing homelessness. And she's also spent a good amount of time contacting people who are living under bridges or in tents in the woods or out in the often harsh weather of Western New York. Often, she says, homelessness is linked to paranoia, depression, or substance use. She has authored 8 textbooks and co-authored or contributed to 14 more and numerous journal articles. Oh, it's a mouthful. Eileen Triggerboff, will you just take this away? And welcome.
I am taking it away. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I know this is labeling it as a complex issue is simplifying it. So we are going to dig in and do what we can to try to give you information that will be helpful for you as you try to help people who have all of these issues all at the same time. So one of the things I want to do right off the bat is to define the terms. So let's look at what we're going to be talking about today, because everybody has slightly different definitions, and we want to make sure we're all at least focusing on the same topics. So the first thing is going to be self-care. Then we're going to talk about wellness, homelessness, which you think would be self-explanatory, but there are different terms, substance abuse, and the CODs, the co-occurring disorders, which there are many. There are some that are much more common, but then there are the ones that are uncommon, and those are the ones that usually present the most challenges for us. When something new pops up, what do we do about it? And then what do we do? How do we intervene? So that's generally what we're going to be talking about today. So to define self-care and wellness, are they able to meet their basic needs? And the basic needs are they safe? Are they in an environment where they can feel like they can get some rest and some downtime, or are they constantly on alert where they're tense and afraid or upset or angry? And so the safety is probably the #1 issue that everybody should be paying attention to. Where are they? Are they sleeping with their backs to a wall? Are they in a sturdy enough under a tarp or a good sturdy box? Where are they? What kind of shelter are they providing for themselves? Do they just have a lean-to in the woods, or are they under a bridge, or are they living in, the sun house or somebody's garage under their portico? Are they able to provide themselves with food? And what kind of food are they able to get? Are they dumpster diving? Are they getting food from shelters? Are they getting food from some charity? Are they able to get enough rest? They might not be able to sleep deeply, and that can contribute to a co-occurring disorder. Some people will use substances just to get some rest, but how are they able to sleep? And what are their individual expectations for satisfaction? Because wellness is how satisfied you are with your activities and with your environment and with your relationships. And if their expectation is that I don't really want to deal with a lot of people, I'm not into that, I just want to be left alone, and they have more of a solitary lifestyle, then wellness for them is going to be a different situation than wellness for somebody who's very social and likes to talk to people, and likes to get information from other people. And I'd add, in terms of wellness, are they taking care of their body in some way? Very hard to do when you're out in the world and you don't have a stable place to stay. Are they able to take care of their teeth and their mouth, which is the biggest problem when people have co-occurring disorders with psychiatric problems and with substance abuse problems? What's going on with their skin? They're going to be much more vulnerable to lesions and to infections and to bugs, things like that. What's going on with their hair and their nails? We can usually tell if somebody's healthy by the shape of their hair and their nails. Is their hair dull? That kind of gives us an idea about what's going on with their nutrition and their hygiene. Are they in pain? And pain is an important thing to pay attention to, because pain is very difficult to cope with. And pain all by itself is difficult to cope with. And when you're in pain and you're out in the world trying to take care of your safety, that is a huge problem. And if you are in pain and you have a psychiatric disorder or a substance abuse disorder, that's going to be difficult. And then the gritty issue of how do they take care of their elimination? Where do they go to the bathroom? Are they constipated? Do they have a urinary tract infection? These are all things that contribute or detract from wellness. So the definition of homelessness, not exactly a discussion that gets argued about much. It's just not having a stable and a safe place to live, to rest, and to sleep. It's having unreliable housing. Maybe you're couch surfing. Maybe someone is able to stay 2 or 3 days in one place, but they can't stay any longer, and they don't know where they're going to go the next day, and they have to go searching for something, and they just don't have a dependable place to take care of themselves. Or they're in a vulnerable housing situation where they rent from a place that's being sold, and maybe it has already been sold, and they're being evicted, but it takes time to go through the courts, and maybe the owner is being obstreperous about that and trying to get them out by making the environment increasingly unsafe or unwelcoming. So the vulnerable housing situation is actually a lot more common than you would think, and lately, especially with the way things are going with the economy. Defining co-occurring disorders is typically defined as a substance use disorder in addition to a serious mental illness, depression, and alcoholism, bipolar illness, and cocaine addiction. Are the substances used to self-medicate the symptoms of the mental health issue? That's a very good question to approach or to assess as you have contact with people, because then if we can address the symptom with medication, then we can deal with the substance use that was used to help them cope with their symptoms. We can use a reduction of harm method, and they would still have their symptoms addressed. How often is the client using substance of abuse? If it's infrequent, if they don't have access to it a lot, they've had the diagnosis for a while, but they're not using so much anymore, it's something to be paid attention to, because when the opportunity arises, they may use. and that can disrupt a lot of the healthy path that they may have been on. And what are the health diagnoses? Do they have hypertension? Have they had a stroke? Do they have difficulty speaking, which can indicate a stroke? Do they have weakness on one part of their body, which can indicate that they have had a stroke? Are their legs swelling, which can indicate a cardiac problem? So you want to take a look and see what their health diagnosis is. Well, they might not know, but it'll give you an idea of what they need in terms of services. So intervening. What is being asked for? Now, we all want people to be happy and healthy, but our definition of happy and healthy might not be the individual's. And you don't want to be shoving down their throat something that they don't want. So what are they asking for? What are you able to give them? What's the best first approach? What's the priority in your care? And do you have a variety of intervention options? Sometimes you don't have a lot of options. But when you do, you have to prioritize which ones come first. And how prepared are you to intervene? We don't want to just take people and toss them out into the community and say, there you go, I know you have a good heart, go and do this, and go and help people. They have to be prepared for dealing with people who might be very upset, might be very symptomatic, might be angry or hungry or in pain, or they might have just been the victim of a crime and they are very upset and traumatized. And do you want to know that you have the capability to handle somebody who can flip from one set of experiences to another right in front of you, that you have the ability to do that? And if you don't, there's lots of resources to help you get them, and that would help you to be a better person in terms of intervening effectively with this particular group of people. And if you start intervening, you're all ready, you have a good thing in mind, you're intervening, is it being resisted? Is that person pushing back on your interventions? And are they having some difficulty, and maybe they're not ready for the intervention? Because certainly people have the right to go at a pace that suits them, even though it might not suit us. We might think, gee, this really needs to be taken care of right now. And that might not be where that person is right then. But it's not about us, it's about them. So we have to do that. We have to keep that in mind. So we have to prioritize. That's the element of being effective, is to take a look at what is the most important thing that we need to do for the people we're trying to provide services for. And the very first thing that we're going to do in terms of prioritizing is go to safety. The safety aspect is our personal safety, because we're out there with people who may be unstable. They may be victims of crimes, and the criminals who have victimized them might be waiting for us as well. And, you can't make this stuff up. It happens. You go to help somebody, they've just been mugged, and there they are jumping on your back at the same time. So you have to watch out for your personal safety, otherwise you're not going to be in good shape to help anybody else. Then you have to look at the safety of everybody in your environment and the safety of the environment. Is the environment in a very precarious set of circumstances? Is the environment going to be precarious? Like, is it right on the bank of a river that is starting to flood? Is somebody staying in a wadi and it's dry, but there's a thunderstorm about 5 miles away, and that wadi fills up with water and it has a flash flood very quickly? So these are the kinds of things you have to pay attention to, especially when you're in an environment that you might not know real well. If you're in a desert environment, know the hazards. If you're in a mountainous area, know the hazards. Mountainous areas, things can just, a storm can crash around a mountain very quickly. And the same thing in a beach area or around a lake or a river. So look for every aspect of your there and the environmental safety. So there's a variety of questions that people need to address with safety. Are you identified as a problem? Are you Are you considered an authority that somebody really doesn't want to deal with? Does law enforcement feel like you're an impediment to protecting other people in the community, that your focus is not overall too helpful? Are you viewed by the client as somebody who's an enforcer of treatment that they're not ready for or that they don't agree with? Do they have are you in a situation that's safe for you to approach? And I had mentioned the weather aspects and the certainly lightning and flooding and things like that, but also, is there a lot of movement? Is there a lot of yelling? Are there people with weapons in the environment? Is there immediate danger to the client? Is there immediate danger to you? Is the client able to ensure their safety the way they are right now? When you get up and leave from this interaction that you have with them, are they able to take care of themselves? Or are they too intoxicated, or are they too overwhelmed by mental health symptoms that it would be difficult for them to take care of themselves? And that's a safety issue that has to be foremost in your activities. And is the environment going to remain safe during your contact? Have you established that everything's kind of stable with the weather and stable with the situation? You're on a dock, it's floating, it's not sinking. You're on a boat that's not sinking. In terms of how you are identified as helpful or not, what is your reputation in that environment? Do people know you? Or are you new to the whole scene? If they don't know you, there would be absolutely no reason for them to just say, okay, I trust you, here I go, because they're living in a world where trust is very precious, and it's not going to be given easily. So your reputation in that environment will help. So if you approach somebody and just say, this is who I am, this is what I do, if you need something from me, I will try to give it to you, and you're not forcing yourself on the situation immediately, that can be helpful in defining who you are and in establishing your relationship with the environment. So they know that you're not somebody who's just going to bulldoze over them and do what you think is right for them, and paying attention to what they value. Their values might be very different from yours, and their values are the ones that count. And then, have you established yourself as somebody who's trustworthy, worthy of their trust? What have you done to get it? It's not going to be handed over to you. You have to earn it. And that can take some time and some effort. And while you might immediately want to jump in, at least I know I have immediately wanted to jump in and fix things and help things and be of some use to somebody, when it comes right down to it, what the focus needs to be on is what I really want to do, but what they really need and what they want at that time. And certainly that can be arranged. You just have to know that that is the expectation. So empathy is the next on the list of priorities. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is when you've had the situation and you layer your feelings over or alongside what you think the person would feel. Oh, I've had that surgery and I know it's really awful, or my aunt had lost her home and I know what you're feeling. I mean, that's sympathy. Empathy is when you focus only on their experience and what they're telling you about, and you care about them and you care about their experience. And that is precious. That is something that a lot of people don't get, and you certainly can't get it from some random person. And most of us are trained on how to be empathetic with somebody. And if you are genuine about your empathy, it's just not a manufactured script that you toss out, but you really do care about what's going on with these individuals, which I'm guessing that that's why you're all listening to this, is because you have a genuine interest in this. So I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on how to develop genuineness. But boundaries is an issue that we're going to talk about in some details. And then how do you listen? How to listen to somebody who might be not the best at communicating. They might be very symptomatic, so their communications might be garbled. They might be even destroyed, so much so that you've got what we call word salad. They just toss a lot of words out and you're trying to make a sentence out of it. So how do you communicate with somebody who is having some communication difficulties? And then there is somebody who might be drunk or high. If they're intoxicated or inebriated, their communications are going to be dictated by what's going on and coursing it through their system. So listening might have different demands at that point. Cognition is the next priority. It's the thinking process. So thinking is affected by inebriation, certainly, but also by withdrawal from that substance, or if they're actively psychotic. And you can be psychotic with any number of severe mental health issues. You can be psychotic certainly with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disease, but you can also be psychotic with depression, bipolar disorder. Some personality disorders might have micro-psychotic episodes associated with them, which is going to affect how they think, how they problem solve, how they process information. Mania, depression, and even the negative symptoms of schizophrenia will really affect someone's thinking. You can't be effective when somebody's cognitions are so disturbed that they can't process what you're saying. So what you're needing to be doing is back up to safety and evaluating whether they're able to take care of themselves in that environment. And if they are, but they aren't communicating very well, then you move to some problem solving. What's their biggest problem at that moment? What can you do about it? And then how are they coping? They have a lot to cope with. They have a lot they have to manage. These are not easy problems, and they have a number of them all at the same time. So coping also needs to be prioritized. Health is the next priority. What is the health issue? I mean, can you see it when you look at the person? Are you able to assess immediately what's going on with them? Are the whites of their eyes not white? They're yellow. They're having some liver problems, liver damage, cirrhosis, hepatitis, very common. Typhus is now becoming a huge problem with the homeless. Are they in imminent danger from their health problem? Are they short of breath? Are they having trouble moving even a short distance? They are ultimately fatigued just by walking a few steps. These are imminent danger health issues. Acknowledging what their health concern is. If they're out of breath and their sclera, the whites of their eyes are yellow, which to you would say that this person needs some health care interventions. But what's their priority? What do they say is the problem? And acknowledging their health concern. They might be concerned because they have ingrown toenails and they just can't walk, or they have fungus that's just driving them nuts with this itch. And then what can you do to address the health concern? And of course you're going to prioritize, acknowledge what they're saying and try to prioritize it, but introduce into the concept of, other issues could also be addressed. Health needs, basically you have to learn from them. What do they want? What do they need? You might be very concerned with the fact that they're losing teeth, because it's very hard to keep your teeth clean out in the world without a lot of support and supplies. But they might not be worried so much about that. They might be more worried that they feel frightened all the time, or they feel scared all the time, or they feel angry all the time. Or they just feel like people aren't respecting them as human beings, and they feel like they're just being treated like garbage. Learn what they need and try to address it and acknowledge it. And what are the alternatives? What choices do you all have? You can't give them every single service, because every single service isn't available to any of us. What can you do? What's the path that you can go by that will help? And the denial of a physical illness is not just the purview of people who are homeless or people who have a mental health issue. We all have a certain level of denial, and we all have a certain level of not being able to identify when we are getting sick or when we have a problem. We can't get there yet. It's called interoception. It's perception of what's going on with us internally. And so when you see somebody who's sick, they might not realize it. And it might not be denial so much as they just are not aware of it yet. They just haven't gotten there yet. So we've talked about some of the problems, but now we're going to look at some strengths. And always good to have as a priority a concept of that person has some strengths. They have to have some strengths. Living out in the world, I don't know that I could do it. So somehow they're managing in a way that is using their skills. They have special skills. So what are their social skills? How have they managed to live out there in the world thus far? They must be good at something. And let them tell you what is it they're good at. And if they're not able to tell you that, which could be a symptom of depression, it could be a symptom of the depressive swing of bipolar disorder, you might be able to tell them that they have a strength in a particular area, that they have some social skills. They're talking to you. Talking to somebody who's either a stranger or somebody they don't know very well. It's not a family member. It's not a friend. It's just, they're just talking to you. That is a social skill. It's a strength. What's their intelligence level? If they're talking to you about things and you're getting information from them, they must have some level of intelligence. At whatever level, you can make use of it. They have street smarts. They're on the street, and they've been smart about it. They've had success in that area to a certain extent. Find out if they still have access to friends and relatives for intermittent assistance. That could be a strength that we can capitalize on. And intermittent assistance is better than no assistance at all. If they can get a few days to rest on somebody's couch or to do house sitting for somebody or to clear out a yard for a few nights to sleep in the guest house, these are things that might help them. So next is relationships. And relationships are touchy in terms of topics to discuss. You can think to yourself, what characterizes a relationship? It can be the relationship between somebody who buys drugs from somebody else. Do they trust their drug dealer? Do they trust the nurse who comes out to give them their injection once a month? Do they have a relationship with the other homeless people who are in their environment? Do they look out for each other? If they look out for each other, that's a healthy relationship. And I have found that to be very helpful, that when you look at a little community, you might have 5 or 6 people living in a certain environment. And if you come along and somebody says, hey, what are you up here for? Because they don't know me. That's a wonderful strength. That is a definition of a good relationship to me, because somebody's watching out for them. And they might be a little overzealous with the, hey lady, get out of here, especially if they're having paranoid symptoms. But for me, they're taking care of that person, they're watching out for them, and that is a good little community they've got going there. And ask, do they have an attachment to somebody? Have they established a bond with anybody in a healthy manner, not just to their drug dealer, but a service worker, a volunteer, shelter personnel, somebody that they feel that they have a relationship with. And if they say they do have a relationship with somebody, then that indeed is another strength, and you can work with that. Now, the progress and timing is difficult. And as you all know this, you probably all know this better than I do, serious mental illness and co-occurring disorders are typically chronic. They don't just come and hang around for a couple of weeks and then they're gone. They're there for a long, long time, if not for the duration. So you're addressing either or both, either the serious mental illness or a substance abuse or a health issue. It requires a lot of patience on your part. And because we're going by their timing, not ours, that makes it extra hard for us, because we might think this really needs to be taken care of immediately. They're going to be thinking, this is what's really important to me, and if I'm being respected as an adult, I need to pay attention to this. Success on approaching and intervening depends on your clinical awareness. How good are you at understanding the awareness of this? Somebody is not going to all of a sudden come down from a manic swing of bipolar disorder just because you walk into their world. They're going to be manic. How are you going to deal with it? Mania is typically verbally aggressive, tumbling words right over each other, being kind of denigrating in the way that they interact with other people, including you, and how are you going to address that? You know, in that moment, you need to have some ready skills to use, some clinical awareness when somebody is psychotic. What do you do when somebody says, I'm a snake, and I need a mongoose right now? You need to address the feelings that that person is having and not the content of, I'm a snake. You can't make this stuff up. So people are going to be hurting, they're going to be frightened, they're going to be sick, probably intoxicated, they might be manic, or they just could be angry about their circumstances. And you have to be aware of that and know that it takes some time to deal with it. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is situational awareness. All of us are doing what we do because we want to make a difference. We want to improve the situation. We certainly don't want to make it more difficult. We want to encourage that person to have self-efficacy, that they can do something effective for themselves. That's the goal. And they already have declared their independence. Either it was enforced because they got evicted, because they lost their job, and so they lost their ability to keep their home. They have 3 children. The 4 of them are living out on the street. So yes, they're independent, but they do have serious problems that have to be dealt with in order for them to consider themselves as efficacious about their lives. What are their responsibilities? Are they on their own? And do they have a health problem that needs to be taken care of? A substance abuse problem that they would like to address, they're ready to address it. Are they needing to take medication for their psychiatric illness? Do they have children with them that the entire family is homeless? Not unusual. It happens, and it just ramps up the responsibilities tenfold. Do they have a pet with them? Do they have a dog? Do they have a cat? Do they have a bird or a ferret? I've seen any number of people who've been homeless who have a pet with them, and they became homeless, and their priority is their pet. And we can understand that if you have pets, that it's very important. It's like taking care of your child, but it does ramp up the responsibilities. And also you have to be aware of what services are available for the pets, for the kids. Is there intoxication on a regular basis? Is that mostly how the person is living their life? They're living their life under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Or are they withdrawing from drugs or alcohol, either because they have chosen to try to reduce the harm that they're doing to themselves, they've chosen to try to be abstinent, or they just don't have access to their supplies at that moment, and so they're going through withdrawal. Withdrawal from certain substances can be very dangerous. If somebody has been an alcoholic for a long time, routinely ingesting alcohol to the point where they have a high level of tolerance and then abruptly stop, the chances of them having delirium tremens, where they would have seizures and they would have delirious experiences where they would see things that are not there, usually visual hallucinations of bugs or bats. That is very dangerous because as a delirium, as they have delirious symptoms, they won't be able to take care of their safety. They might run out into traffic. They might not realize that there's a flood coming from where they are trying to sleep. And what's happening with their symptoms from their mental illness or from their health issues. So what are your responsibilities? That needs to be taken into account. How has the client taken care of themselves thus far, and the people or animals that they are responsible for? And can you detect the intoxication, the withdrawal, or the symptoms of a serious mental illness? So all of those things contribute to your situational awareness. So let's talk about why are people in this circumstance? I've already mentioned a couple of things. You probably know dozens and dozens of circumstances that would contribute to this. But the basic list is people have lost their entitlements. They no longer have Medicare, Medicaid. They no longer have Social Security disability for some reason. They've lost money in some way. They've lost their jobs. They've lost their health insurance. Sorry, that's on me. They have poor access to care or no access to care. mental health symptoms can be overwhelming, and their coping mechanisms just might not be able to handle a real exacerbation of mental health symptoms. Manipulation is a learned skill to get needs met. So people might be in this circumstance because they have manipulated others in such a way that it got them homeless. They have basically burned their relationship bridges because they have been stealing, lying, cheating, hurting people, any number of criminal activities, and just interactional processes that are very unhealthy, and they don't have anywhere to turn. And that's how they end up in this circumstance. Substance use can be a coping mechanism. I mentioned that it could be used to treat mental health symptoms. It also can be used to treat the side effects of the treatment for mental health. So we have somebody who is psychotic. We give them an antipsychotic. It makes them stiff and uncomfortable, and they feel blah and no enjoyment of life, and so they're going to get drunk or high so that they can feel loose and normal and happy. And so the substance abuse might be a result of us treating the major mental illness that they have. Substance acquisition and substance use can become a priority when somebody has a substance use disorder. That is the most important thing that can happen to somebody who uses substances. Nothing else is as important as getting and using their drug of choice, whether it's alcohol or drugs. Alcohol is just a liquid drug. So I've had people who would not pay attention to their children because they were busy getting their substances. So we know that substance acquisition is a priority, but also substance use can be very compelling. I had somebody who was on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, and he was standing on the railing that separates the boardwalk from the beach, and he was flapping his wings, flapping his arms like they were wings, and screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'm an eagle! I'm an eagle!" with a crack pipe in his mouth. And he was smoking crack on the boardwalk, on this railing, in full view of many law enforcement people. And it was so important to him to do that. And the police were very understanding. They came, they got him down off the railing, and they took him to be sobered up. And they said that he routinely does this. So it's very dangerous for people to be using substances because they aren't paying attention to what's going on in their environment. So someone might approach a dealer with some money that they got to get the drug that they want, and the dealer will just beat them up and take their money and leave them someplace. So the circumstances are varied and dangerous for why people might be in these set of circumstances. So you have a general idea of why they're there, how they got there, what's going on with them. And now you have to figure out, what am I going to do? You have to select an approach. And for this individual, what do you do first? The first aspect to address has to combine what you see is very important, but also what they see is very important. And it might be difficult to make that kind of arrangement, that kind of compromise. What are your resources? None of us have unlimited resources when we're trying to help people. We have time limits, we have money limits, we have supply limits, and we have to acknowledge that and not promise something that we can't deliver. And be right up front with people. I have never had somebody say to me when I have said, this is what I can do, and I won't be able to do any more. Will you accept this for me? I have never had somebody say, oh, sure, you could do more and you just don't want to. But look, I wouldn't be surprised if I did hear that at some point. Who is prepared to intervene? Is it just you, or do you have a team of people? Can you hand it off? Can you tap out if something becomes overwhelming for you? Because taking care of yourself is very important in this process. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to get anything done. And how much time can you allocate to each individual? We don't have unlimited resources, so we have to pay attention to that. Interacting with those you want to help is not just verbal, but also physical. What can you do to help them? What can you provide for them? Do you have supplies that you can share? Is there follow-up that you do? Or you just one touch and you're gone? So that's the definition of your intervention process. When you do interact with people, you've got to keep your boundaries in mind. You all know this, but I'm on a roll, so I'm just going to go over this. A boundary is what separates you from the people you're trying to help. Everybody has boundaries, and it's extremely important to keep your boundaries intact. And there's different kinds of boundaries. There's emotional, spiritual, sexual, and relational boundaries, and it's what's appropriate for your particular interaction. So emotional boundaries are, we have a set of feelings and reactions that are ours from our experiences, and we respond to the world. And the reason you're doing this is because you care about these individuals. People who don't care don't last in this business anyways, so they'll move on to something else. But we have to keep that boundary tight. I might see somebody that I could easily bring home and make a good life for, and it is completely inappropriate for me to do that. My wishes, my desires, and my hopes don't work with this crowd. You are doing them a disservice. So I need you to pay attention to your emotional boundaries because it'll keep you healthy in the long run. Spiritual boundaries is basically the same thing. What I believe might not be what anybody else believes. We all need a meaning to life. We don't need to have each other's meaning to life. We need to respect what people have a goal in mind, and monitor what's going on. Sexual boundaries, well, that's pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't promote wellness to have any kind of sexual relationship with somebody we're trying to help. It confuses the issue, it muddies the water, and it makes it very difficult. And that also leads into relational boundaries. What is appropriate? I had somebody as a private practice patient who I easily could have seen as my best friend for the rest of my life, an absolutely lovely woman. But that wasn't my place. My place was to be her therapist, and it's my loss because she would have been a wonderful friend, but I didn't need to muddy up her life with a power exchange in a relationship. So we keep our relationships intact. Mental illness and communication, I'm going to go through this, rather briefly because you all have experience with this. Co-occurring disorders are highly prevalent and deeply entwined with homelessness because people usually can't keep their entitlements, can't keep their jobs, their houses, their relationships all intact. They need to address these symptoms, and you need to understand how they can interfere with someone maintaining a reasonable life for themselves. So how do you respond to the co-occurring disorder symptoms? You have to know the symptoms of the mental illness. If it's depression, assess if they have passive suicide by being out in the world and not taking care of their basic safety needs, food, they're not eating, they're not paying attention to themselves, or if they're actively lethal. If they're psychotic, focus on the feelings, not on the content. If they're impaired, make sure no one can take advantage of them or hurt them while they are drunk or high. And it's not easy, but it's something that we need to do. We need to look at those symptoms. And knowing something isn't enough. You have to have some wisdom. And like I put up there, knowing a tomato is fruit is knowledge, but wisdom is not putting tomatoes in a fruit salad. So combine what you know with the approaches that work, non-judgmental. It doesn't work when we say, you shouldn't be doing that. You know better. Those kinds of things. Non-confrontational. You're working with where they are at and you're moving forward. You're not trying to be an adversary. You're focusing on them and you are being semi-directive. You're suggesting and you're guiding, but you're not demanding and being a bully. With substance abuse, there can be options like supervised consumption, and there are facilities that focus on reduction of harm instead of abstinence. That works better with serious mental illness, by the way. Abstinence going right off the bat is going to be very disappointing. Supervision to prevent overdose. Relapse rates tend to be high. We know this with substance abuse, so we have to pay attention to these things. What do? I mean, the crux of everything we're talking about is what do you do? Be available to the limits of your resources. Have boundaries that promote coping and wellness. Find out what their strengths are. Be realistic about their abilities to manipulate, because they may be very good at it, but look at what their strong, healthy routines are and try to talk about that with them. Discuss it. No preaching, but just talk about these things. How is that working out for you? How did this happen? And what can we do to make it better for you? Promote recovery. Positively reinforce that healthy behavior. Work on solutions when their thinking is clear. Don't try to problem solve when somebody is impaired. They won't retain it, and you'll get frustrated, and we need you to be in the business. We need you to be there, so we don't want you frustrated and burning out and getting out of there. Everybody has a healthy part to them. You might have to dig for it. There's always a healthy part. Find it and work with it and be worthy of their trust. Let's see. Rapport, well, it's easier when you mirror. So if they're sitting on the ground, sit on the ground. If they're standing, stand. You know, try to be approachable in that way and know that it takes time to establish that relationship. It's not automatic, and sometimes people just won't relate to you, and that's okay. Maybe there's somebody else who would be more useful in that role. Everybody's not everybody's best friend. Examples, just support when somebody is optimistic, reasonable optimistic behavior. Comment on past or present successes. Gee, you're good at this. You did this. That's a good thing. Ask open-ended questions of people. How did you do this? And when did that happen? Describe to me what happened and when was that a part of your life? And ask what's important to them, because this is about them. It's client-centered. Helping clients appreciate the value of change. Explore the discrepancy between how they want their lives to live versus how they're currently living. And talk about how they can get there. Options. If they're resistant, roll with it. Just, they're not ready, fine. They might be ready if you're patient and ready to be there when they are ready. Support whatever they do so they can be autonomous. And motivation to change comes from them, not from you. You can't motivate anybody. You can help reinforce whatever motivation they have. Here's some options for shelters and for some structures that they might be available for. There's shelters, drop-in centers, supervised programs, supervised living, but the availability on these is very tough. Availability of housing first programs, and people who are marginally housed face these similar challenges, so they also need to have an awareness of what's available to them. I have homelessness kits. Everybody probably does this as well. I don't think it's unique for me, but things that are really useful to people who are homeless or are in insecure homing situations. Portable foods that are healthy, cleanliness aspects, toothpaste, toothbrush, wipes, deodorant, sanitary pads or tampons, alcohol-free mouthwash, because you don't want to have people drinking it if they're desperate for some alcohol. And just some environmental awareness. I mean, I live in the Northeast, and so it's cold and wet and humid and weird, and sometimes all in the same day. So socks, mittens, thermal blankets, hand and foot warmers, very useful to have in a kit. And talk about what you need to do with your colleagues. Self-care is going to keep you active. You need to know your boundaries, have realistic energy expenditure. You're not going to fix everybody right away. Get some supervision. Don't do this alone. Be accountable for your actions. Realize if you've stretched too far, bent a boundary, or got too involved, you'd say, wait a minute, that didn't really work. I need to back off. Don't take difficult interactions personally, especially when someone has symptoms of a serious mental illness or a personality disorder. That's not about you. But self-care also has this altruistic feature to it. If you take care of yourself, you're going to be a healthy model for those you want to help. They're going to look at you and say, oh, she's doing the right thing. He's doing the right thing by themselves. And evaluate your impact. Were you able to establish a relationship? Who are you good with? Are you able to have a relationship with some people and not others? You are not going to relate well to every single person on the face of the earth. You can't do that. You can't expect that of yourself. But gauge who you're good with and work on the ones maybe you're not so good at. Maybe it's something for you to reach for. Was there a reduction of harm for that individual? Were you able to help in that regard? Were you able to consider alternatives, or did you just have brain lock and you just locked up? And can you do something to help you to prevent that the next time? And were small increments towards wellness and self-care achieved? And that's a big ask. It's a big lift. But if you got a small increment in that direction and you established a healthy relationship, then you did a fabulous job, and you need to give yourself credit for it. It's not easy, it's not fast, but it is such a wonderful thing that you're putting out there in the world. So just to summarize what we went over today, we talked about the priorities when you work with people who have serious mental illness and a co-occurring disorder, and be situationally aware for you and for those people, because both of you need to be around. Select a helpful approach, be flexible and patient, and intervene for the prioritized needs, and evaluate your impact. And each interaction, you probably need to give yourself an evaluation, because it can help you to move forward, to recognize what's going on. And if you have supervision, that helps too, because somebody can say to you, you did a really great job with that, even though you're exhausted and you don't feel like you got a thing done. But basically, you got that person to say hello to you, and they have never spoken to somebody else in 12 years. So that, in summary, is what we covered. Okay, and I didn't go too far over, did I?
You did great. Thank you, Eileen. Oh, I'm echoing a little bit, Zach. So we have time for some questions. I see a question, how can I get a copy of the slides? They are in the download materials box. All you have to do is, I think, double click and you can download those. Someone else asked earlier if they can be printed. Yes, indeed they can, and I would encourage you to do so. They're very helpful and interesting. So we have a question from Nancy Burke Bradley, who's saying, why are so many people who are homeless not receiving or qualifying for SSI? And I would just start by saying, you know, accessing SSI is a process. I would encourage you to look into SSI, SSDI, Outreach Access and Recovery Program, SOAR. You can find the SOAR TA Center. I think this is a difficult process that requires assistance. But Eileen, I'm going to hand it over to you if you have any other insights on that.
Well, you know, the SSI, you know, we know that Social Security is both state and federal. So when somebody, for example, if somebody had federal Social Security payments that they were getting and they get hospitalized, while they're in the hospital, they will get state or county SSI. Their entitlements will change while they're inpatient, especially if they're in a state facility. When they get discharged, hopefully they're discharged to a place, so you would be able to transfer them back over to their previous entitlement source. However, if you don't have an address, you can't do that. So then you have to involve family or friends so that you have an address where these can be sent. And if they come from an inpatient to an outpatient setting, that's pretty easy to do. But if they've never been inpatient and they have lost their entitlements, then you're really going to have a problem trying to get somebody hooked back up with the system. If you have the kind of services that will do that, regularly meet with the person, get the paperwork done for them. They're not going to be able to do it on their own. It's very complex. And go with them to their appointments. That's really the nitty-gritty of getting it done.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Nancy asked if we would repeat that resource. I would say it's a SAMHSA program, SOAR, S-O-A-R, and you can find the SOAR TA Center I believe it's on Policy Research Associates website. So if you type SOAR, PRA in your browser, it'll pop right up, and I would encourage you to look into that. It's a fabulous program that really helps direct service providers help people who need those resources, get them at the earliest possible juncture. So very important resource. We've got another question from Jessica Hicks. Jessica is asking, when clients are appreciative and grateful for services, they usually say, I love you and want hugs. How do you recommend handling this? It hasn't felt inappropriate, and yet, I think that's a great question. Eileen, want to take it?
It is. How to, wow, okay. It's very important to be involved and to take care of what's going on and to take care of yourself while you're doing it. And how difficult is it to do this as a, if you want to start this as a business, if you want to start this as a service, that's probably a better way of saying it. It's difficult to do, but not impossible. And you would use the successful processes that are around. So what's around? How is it working? Can you do that? That's the basics. And then how do I do that? Go talk to somebody who has a very successful, and success is relative, of course. How do I get there? Does that answer it?
I think so. I would just add to that. When I am working with people, I tend to let them set the tone. And if it feels okay to give somebody a hug, it feels healthy, it feels good, then it can be more damaging to not. That said, it can also not feel good if somebody wants a hug and you don't feel comfortable with it, and then you just need to rely on your boundaries. I don't know if there's a solid policy ever for that. This is it's a person-by-person judgment. So, Jessica, hopefully that was helpful. All right, so we have a question from Adam Broca. We have recently started monthly clinical supervision and monthly case discussions, and one common theme is challenges around upholding the agency's philosophy of housing first, with the challenges that arise from mental health and substance use issues. Do you have any resources to support us with that? I'm going to start by saying, please do go to the SAMHSA website and download the Permanent Supportive Housing Toolkit. It is excellent, and there are a lot of pieces in there that may be helpful, Adam. But Eileen, what would you add to that?
Well, not a lot. That's really good. that was a really good answer. So I wouldn't add. I would just reinforce what you said. I thought it was very helpful.
Well, thank you. All right. So the Permanent Supportive Housing Kit, if you just go onto the SAMHSA.gov website and type that in to the search engine, it'll pop right up. And I use that a lot, and I think it's a really effective tool. Joanne Bynum is asking, is it difficult to start and run your own homeless shelter? I'm just going to give that an unequivocal yes. Yes, that is hard. I mean, do you have anything to add to that?
That's the question that I was looking at when I was answering the previous question, so I got myself all bollocksed up there. But yes, it is very hard. I would reinforce that you go find a homeless shelter that you think works, even if it's in another community, and talk to them about how they do it. And it is, we have a couple of wonderful shelters here. I'm in the Buffalo area, and God bless you if this is something you want to do. Go and talk to somebody who does it successfully and see if you have the resources, the patience, and the energy to do it. and that you have nice tight boundaries because you're going to need them all.
Yep, I would agree. I know several shelters that people with wonderful, wonderful intentions have set up in small communities around Montana, where I live. And people go into it for the best possible reasons, and just by virtue of the nature of the problem, it is really complicated. And so I would also encourage you to be well aware of the nature of homelessness and mental health issues and substance use issues and all the things that come along with trying to survive in homelessness, including, as Eileen very articulately said, manipulation strategies. It is a wonderful strength people use when they're trying to exist in homelessness, and it can make serving people really difficult if you don't have the appropriate education. So that was a pretty long answer for a really short question. And we've got about 4 minutes left. So we'll take one more question. Rakeem Booker is saying, are there available housing resources for individuals convicted of sexual offenses? A huge barrier for individuals registering under Megan's Law face rejection for affordable housing programs while receiving Social Security. I will underline that, yes, indeed, that is a huge problem. I don't know of any particular resources at a federal level. Do you, Eileen?
I don't. As a matter of fact, the only thing that we've been able to struggle through with that is when somebody's a registered sex offender, we check to see what level they're at, and if it was they got registered because they're an alcoholic and they're homeless, and so they tend to urinate in public, and they got arrested for exposing themselves, and that's what their level is. Those individuals tend to be easier to find housing opportunities for because it wasn't actually contact. Sexting, we've had a couple of people who have a sex offender status because of sexting, especially sexting with a minor. And while they served time for it, they had difficulty finding housing opportunities for them, but it is not a contact. And so that has been a little bit of an advantage, but very difficult. Nobody really wants to rent to or have a whole house full of people who are registered sex offenders.
I think that's a really important tip, is to look at their level and to look at the offense. I know I serve as the chairman of our board of directors for our local public housing authority, and with our permanent supportive housing vouchers, which are geared to serving people coming out of homelessness, we can often smooth out some of the barriers. Certainly, certainly it would be predicated on, how likely are they to reoffend, and how dangerous is this person really, because you have to be careful if you're living in a neighborhood with children who you place next door to the children. So it's, I wish there was a better answer for that. It's hard.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one, and I get that question a lot. I'm sure you do too, Eileen. So we are just about out of time, and I would just like to thank you so much. This was interesting and